Welcome to this special edition of my channel because I'm going to put it in the playlist for my paranormal, even though it is slightly on the movie side, but mostly paranormal. So, we're going to talk about the Conjuring series in general. We're going to talk about the Warrens, uh, and we're going to talk about some of my paranormal experiences plus the paranormal world in general. So this will be rather lengthy. Hopefully you will stay all the way to the end. So let us take a look at the Conjuring series. Now, again, on its merit, the movies themselves, I actually enjoyed. Now, saying that I enjoyed them and, from the other side of the paranormal side, knowing full well that a lot of this stuff is just horror Hollywood style is an understatement. So there was a bunch of movies in the Conjuring series: The Nun, The Nun 2, Annabelle, uh, Creation, Annabelle, and then Annabelle Comes Home. We had The Conjuring, Conjuring 2, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, and then the last one, Devil uh, Last Rites, The Conjuring Last Rites. What I want to talk about is some of the actual facts and fiction of the Conjuring series. So let us begin with the Conjuring at the beginning, anyway. So the Perrin family moves into this farmhouse. They have some paranormal experiences. They bring the Warrens in, and the Warrens do help them. Now, I've seen many things from Andrea Perrin, and she collaborates a lot of what happens in there. Also, the Warrens were deemed to be not as helpful and more hurtful um, by Andrea Perrin. So some of the stuff, you know, happened. It was witnessed by a bunch, especially the um, scene at the table where the mom was launched across the room. And then, in the movie, there is the evil Bathsheba Sherman doing research and stuff. Bathsheba or Sherman uh, had nothing to do with the house in general. She lived, nearer the house, but really didn't have anything to really do with the house. So, in that regard, you know, that is complete fiction. Uh, so, right away, you look at it and say, okay, you know, the Warrens as the public face of the paranormal world for many, many years. Uh, they put themselves out there for what they believed in, which was Ed was a demonologist, as he called himself. Lorraine was a spiritual medium. Again, I'm not going to sit here and bash them or um, you know ridicule them as much, but I want to separate the Hollywood fiction from the actual facts, and you can make up your mind as far as what the Warrens meant to the paranormal world. They have done they said, over 1,000 cases. Um, Obviously, some high-profile ones. But everything they did came under scrutiny, and obviously, there's a lot of people out there that want to debunk paranormal. They also are skeptical of the paranormal. I, as somebody who has always been into the paranormal and wanting to do ghost hunts and wound up doing some, um, have a little bit different perspective on what I've seen and experienced as opposed to what is portrayed out there in the paranormal world. So right away we look at The Conjuring, and so there is a lot of validity to the story. So it starts off on a good note. So we look at Annabelle. So Annabelle comes out, and then they came out with Annabelle Creation. Now, the doll itself is a Raggedy Ann doll, as you've seen from photos, and the Warrens keeping it in their occult museum under lock and key, with being blessed and big signs on it saying, do not touch. Well, the backstory to Annabelle obviously was put into the Conjuring universe in Annabelle Creation. So the story goes, a man was a doll maker. His little girl was killed. Her spirit winds up into Annabelle doll, but it's more on the demonic side. The paranormal world has a problem with spirits and demons. Everything that people see or hear is demons. I'm not sure I believe in all that. I know that I've never encountered a demon. I've encountered spirits, but never demons. And again, there's a lot of uh, paranormal groups out there on YouTube saying that they have had demons, you know, in their investigations. I highly doubt that. I highly doubt that at all. But anyway, let's go back. So the doll, you know, is sold to this lady who gives it to her daughter, Donna, and her roommate, Angie. Angie and Donna experience some paranormal activity, or as they claim, the doll moved. Sometimes there was a sense of dread around it. It also had written things on the walls or on desks saying, "Help me." Again, hard to say whether Annabelle is really possessed or has a spirit that is trapped in there, or could be a hoax. So they had this doll and called Ed Lorraine. So they came and assessed the doll, concluded that it was not possessed, but manipulated by a inhuman presence, or maybe demonic. So they took the doll and they took it back to, obviously, the Warren's Cult Museum. Before that, they had put it in the possession of a priest. And this story is kind of funny, or fun. The priest was on the way to bring the doll to the occult museum, but got into a car accident. So this fuels the Annabelle doll history. There have been documented stories about people dying after seeing the doll. Um, One such story was there was a guy who was making fun of the doll, and he rode his motorcycle home, but died on the way home in a horrific accident on the highway. Again, believe if you want. I tend to think that mere coincidence? Um, could he have been drinking afterwards? You never know. Like, it's, again, it's fact and fiction. Uh, Obviously, I don't believe the doll is like the biggest culprit, and obviously, the Annabelle doll went on tour recently, and then there's all these stories that came out, like the plantation that burned down. Well, Annabelle was in that city, or the guy that was handling Annabelle on this tour dies suddenly. Again, could it be the doll, or could it just be life? You decide. Because I'm not going to sway you either way. So again, there's a lot of stories out there. You can read about all the stories about this doll. The one problem I do have with the whole thing is that it's kept in this very you know, wooden box with latches and everything else. You would think it would be a little bit more confined to something a little harder, but it is what it is. So you've got that one, and then the Annabelle Comes Home movie. So this has some validity to it, whereas um, on their way home uh, to Connecticut, they had to stop in front of the cemetery where Lorraine sees the woman in white and then sees um, other ghostly figures. Has a near death experience where she sees Ed, you know, maybe get hit by a car. She helps him to get out of the way of his car. So again, this is a story that was told by Lorraine. I'm not a big believer in mediums. I've seen mediums in action. And my tour guide, she was a medium. She felt things and so on. And again, I sometimes uh, think like skeptically about it. People with special abilities like that. Uh, I would love to have that ability to do that, and then draw from that experience. But you know, again, it's hard to say you know that people are faking it or they're real. You know what I mean? So again, seeing her in action, though, um, makes me believe that some people do have that ability. Others that I've seen definitely don't have that ability and literally fake it. So, again, those are things that you can decide. So, the whole story of Annabelle Comes Home is that it is haunting Judy. That never happened. It was it was a fan fiction story. Um, Judy had a little bit of an ability, but she stayed away from the whole business of the paranormal. She knew her father and mother did all this stuff, but she tried to stay away from it, and I don't blame her. Her husband, Tony, who actually is or was a big advocate for um, her parents and was with them on many interviews, kind of learned obviously from Ed and Lorraine, and then eventually ran the museum before he ultimately sold it. We'll get to that later. But so Annabelle comes home, starts out, with a little real, and then it's just a bunch of made up stuff. Uh, the doll had never attacked Judy, never once had an incident inside the home. Now, there's many who believe um, that there was never anything in the home because Ed and Lorraine made sure that the house was blessed, and they did a lot of spiritual um, closures and stuff on the house so that it would never interfere. The movies make it seem like the museum is down in the basement. Well, it's not. It is off in a garage. There is uh, a tunnel from the house to the museum. So there's another fiction part of this. So it's a little small shed with a bunch of artifacts in it. Whether they're haunted or not is, again, up to you to decide whether it is or not. There's a lot of stories behind a lot of those artifacts. Again, those things are for you to decide. So we look at The Conjuring 2, the infamous Enfield case in London, about the family where the kids were under attack by a spirit, a couple of spirits. This was the emphasis for the Crooked Man, and obviously the young girl having uh, you know demon voices come through. So the story is a lot of fakery. The paranormal groups at the time and psychologists that were investigating the family took a lot of videos and a lot of audio. They deemed the daughter to have made all this up. The demon voices or the spiritual voices that were heard on these audio tapes, they have a hard time understanding because how was she able to manipulate these? Now, the movie makes it seem like the Warrens were there to help the family out, but uncovering the details of this movie, they were there for a brief couple of days and then left. So, did they believe she was faking it? Or did they just did not want to help them because there wasn't a bigger problem? It's hard to know. But in the movie, it seems like they were there the whole time helping this poor family out, but they weren't ultimately. So again, the movie has a lot of fiction, especially because the family, or the little girl, was deemed to be faking and making this stuff up. So again, reading through it, you decide whether it is or not. Now we look at the Nun series, and this was brought up when the beginning of The Conjuring 2, when Lorraine and Ed are at the Amityville Horror House. She has a vision of a nun, and the nun's name was Volok, and it haunts her throughout The Conjuring 2. When she goes to the Enfield house, she sees Ed's death from this demonic nun. Well, sorry to say, it was made up. All made up. The nun uh, was uh, never really took place. That whole monastery thing, those were kind of tall tales that were told in the past. They were brought to Hollywood. They kind of mixed them in with Wallach, who Lorraine said that she was being haunted by. Um, Wallach is is a um, is a demon um, in the folklore, so there is validity to that, but it does not take form of a nun. Um, it is a winged demon, so the portrayal of the nun just not is whatever. It's Hollywood fiction. The only part of this that is real, and the Nun 2 is just basically a money grab, so I won't even talk about it. But Frenchie, because Frenchie is seen in one of the lecture videos at the beginning of the original Conjuring film because of the exorcism that they did on Frenchie. Well, truth be told, that Frenchie did exist. Maurice Frenchie Thoreau. He was a farmer from Massachusetts. He never worked in France. All right. Uh, Obviously, he was French, but he never worked, in the rectory. So from all accounts, he was involved in a very controversial exorcism that was documented in the book Satan's Harvest. It was written by the witnesses of this exorcism and by the Warrens who did the exorcism. So, Frenchie uh, was having some issues. Um, his family was very, uh, like, wow, his demeanor's changed and some strange stuff is going on. He must be possessed by something. And of course, the Warren stepped in and performed an exorcism. Well, so eventually he was clear of his demons. But 10 years later, he winds up killing his whole family. So, was he really possessed? Or was he a little mentally unstable? You decide on that one. So, Frenchie was real. The rest of the nun story, not real. It was a collection of stories that they put together, but they put Frenchie in there. Decent movies, but just not really real. So, we're looking at pretty much everything here as pretty much not real. So we look at now The Devil Made Me Do It. And this is a high profile one because in 1981, the case of Arnie Johnson, who murdered his landlord over discrepancy. His defense team claimed he was not guilty on the reason of uh, demonic possession. In came the Warrens to back the story up. So this was the first documented case of paranormal on trial, basically. So his defense was that he was, not of right mind because of some spiritual thing that happened where he became possessed by a demonic figure telling him to kill his landlord. The jury didn't believe any of this, and nor did the court, and he was found guilty in the long run. I believe the story depicted that he actually was found not guilty. Also, fiction. So we're batting 1,000 here. Again, the only real story right now is the original one with the parents. Now, the parents were the last owners of that house that had any activity, because the next couple of families that lived there did not experience anything. And it wasn't until the last family moved out when somebody bought it that all this activity started again, randomly. Now, as a person who's been to the Conjuring house twice, I can say for an actual fact that it is not as scary as one would think that this whole franchise was depicted into. Uh, Basically, and I don't have footage of my original um, venture to the Conjuring house. So this was opened up to the public by the family that lived in Maine. They bought the house because they were deeply into the paranormal. And for reasonable prices, you could go in there and investigate the house once they opened it up to the public. They had had strange activity in there. And I'm not going to say that there was not strange activity in there. There was. But scary activity or the presence of Bathsheba, I would say no. But it is kind of a creepy little house. My first experience there was interesting. I was there with Ghost Hunts USA, and I was outside talking to Pam. Now, I did a bunch of investigations with Pam from Ghost Hunts, and her partner helping out at the Conjuring house, Rob, had a couple experiences. One, before we even got started, he was in the library or the book area and thought he had saw one of us walk by, which clearly wasn't the case because we were outside and nobody else was in the house. So he was already, kind of flipping out. We, Pam and I went into the kitchen area and, started to set up equipment and so on, when the bathroom faucet turned on. And it's one of those turn ones. So for that to go off before we even started was kind of crazy. And again, don't have it. My footage all got lost when my laptop shit the bed. So I really wish I had it. But when I took a picture standing in front, I did see an orb come out of the bathroom, but it didn't get captured on camera. That is kind of the way it goes, or kind of the way I go, because a lot of times I don't capture those kind of things. Miraculously, everybody else does. Or could they just be making it up? I don't know. We'll get to all that later. But, so, there was that. I had also another experience in the creepy basement. I will say the basement is pretty creepy. It's an old farmhouse from years ago. But there was a very interesting little thing that was captured on my Phasmobots. So there's this little cubby right before the well area where the sit-down table is in the next room over. And somebody was like, there's there seems to be something in that corner of the cubby. So I walked into the cubby and I turned my back to the corner. And I was like, hey, if there's anybody here in this corner because somebody saw something, touch me on the shoulder or walk in front of me so I know that you're here. And then somebody at the front of the cubby said, or you can pull, my hair. And I'll never forget this, but on the EVP that came through, it said, "Pussies pull hair." And we all were like, what was that? Like, that is crazy. That's a crazy response. Um, so, and again, I wish I had some of the stuff, um, but there was some other stuff in there that was pretty notable. But in the long run, it wasn't that scary. My second adventure to the Conjuring house was with Ashley, who now we had talked about setting up our own paranormal group. It wound up just being me, and I was able to get her to come along um, because she got pregnant. We got pregnant, and she still wanted to go to the Conjuring house. So that video and stuff will come out later on. Uh, Hopefully by November, I hope, or maybe late October, because I still have Letchworth and Wilson's Castle. Wilson's Castle is kind of was neat. It was a gorgeous castle, and the third floor was pretty fun because there were bats up there. Those were more scary than any ghost that could have happened. So all that stuff is coming out in the near future. So definitely check that out. So the Warrens again were heavily criticized for stepping in to, you know, defend Arnie Johnson on this. Arnie Johnson definitely had some issues, but he was definitely not possessed by a demon. So, and then finally, this last movie, The Smurl Haunting. So the movie makes it feel like this was, just a random, like, month or two, maybe even a year of this stuff. The Smurl family bought the house in 1973. The so-called paranormal stuff started happening in 1974, and it wasn't until 1986 did the Warrens get involved when they were called in. Now, the Smurl family uh, lived in a duplex. Their in-laws, so they had, I think they had 5 kids or whatever in this duplex with them, and then next door was the grandparents. So while all this is going on, there's, throwing things and screaming heavily and all that other stuff. The grandparents were interviewed and said that they never heard anything. If you're in a duplex, you can hear screaming or banging or things thrown against the wall. We live in a condo here. You can literally hear things from another condo. Like, the walls are somewhat thin. So you would think a duplex would have the same problem. So, again, 12 years that they lived, 13 years technically, that they lived in the house. But after 1 year, all this stuff started happening. Now, they were deeply religious, and they were also poor. Could that have had any, you know, part of why they were possessed? so to speak, or demonized, or uh, from all accounts, the parents were sexually assaulted by ghosts. Succubuses do exist, incubuses do exist, but did it though? In the Smurl house, when all these investigators, the police, and all that deemed that nothing really was going on, the attention was what they were looking for. So the other thing about the movie too is that they made it seem like Judy and Tony, who is the Warren's daughter and son-in-law, were heavily involved in the end of the movie. They were never in Pennsylvania. Judy never drove to Pennsylvania to help the family or try to figure out what was affecting her. From a magic mirror, the Smurls didn't have a mirror that was demonic. They actually, the Warren Occult Museum has a mirror, but it was not from that haunting. So, yeah. Again, there's a lot of fiction in The Conjuring. Now, again, the movies themselves are actually pretty decent. But the facts that surround these stories is just a lot of Hollywood fiction. The Amityville horror case, which was depicted at the beginning of Conjuring 2. So, the events leading up to the Warrens getting involved were as follows. The DeFino murders did happen. He did um, murder his whole family one night, saying that he had heard voices from inside the house, saying that there was uh, something telling him to kill his family. Okay, so clearly he had some issues. Or did the house actually have a demonic presence? Now we enter the Lutzes. The Lutzes spent 28 days, as the film depicted. They had many experiences. But ultimately, they did leave the house and left everything behind. It was a best-selling book, and the Warrens got involved because they were asked to. And during their investigation was that picture of the little boy, the demon boy. Or how about just a picture of a ghost boy? Stop calling it a demon. It's probably not a demon. Um, the years after the Warrens were there were no activity in the house, and there hasn't been since. But it is still a case that is looked at over and over again because it was such a profitable book and movie. And there have been several movies about the Amityville Horror. Some good, some bad. Retelling. The 2005 movie, I think, with Ryan Reynolds, took a little bit of a different turn. And I believe this was after there was the thought of something more hideous inside that basement area where that wall was, where you saw um, you know, the Lutz father knock down the barrier and something came through. In this one, there was the you know church and just the evilness of what could have happened in these dungeon type things behind that brick wall there. It was an interesting thought, but again, as you read into this, uh, the Lutzes later on and some of their friends uh, claimed that it was somewhat made up from a night of drinking. Okay, well, it makes sense. Even though it was a popular case and still to this day is looked at as the most interesting kind of paranormal experience. Um, I remember I remember the movie, and you don't see many houses nowadays with those windows up in the attic area because they look so demon-esque. So that was always a interesting little note there. So again, the Warrens put themselves out there on national television. They did many speaking engagements. Um, they were involved in many cases. Um, one in particular was the basis for the Haunting in Connecticut movie. Uh, they helped the young boy that was uh, possessed, uh, and a lot of that actually has a lot of fact in it. The house did have uh, some really bad history where there were bones found in the walls and so on. So there was a lot of fact involved in that. But it's not part of the Conjuring series. It's not really considered anything with the Warrens. So did the Warrens actually help, or you know, or did the writer of the movie decide to leave them out of the movie because he didn't believe in it? You never know. So again, it's I am not going to sit here and say that they did not help or they're frauds or anything like that. Again, I think they were the poster child for the paranormal world. And whether you believe that, you know, their cases were real or they had these kind of abilities, that they helped a lot of people, is up to interpretation. I will not slander them by saying that they were complete frauds and so on, like a lot of channels are doing. But there's a lot of fiction in there. So I wish I had, you know, able to, meet them and have kind of an experience with them. Obviously, you can look up on YouTube many of their interviews, and you can choose to believe them or not. That's how this works. So let us get into the paranormal world in general now. It is a complete and absolute circus. It has made me disgusted, and I wish that there was a different way to, you know, separate fakers from the real stuff. But it's hard. It's hard to do. And I'm not going to slander any channels at all, but there are a ton of them out there. Anybody who has watched any debunking channels will know the channels that I am referencing. Uh, thank you to the debunking community for all of that. So my biggest thing is my experiences as opposed to everyone else's are completely different. Ghost hunting is not what, you know, Ghost Adventures or some of these other channels make it out to believe. There's a lot of downtime. There is a lot of things that don't happen. There's some days it does happen. A lot of it sometimes is off camera. And you can't fake that kind of stuff if you are a person like myself. Like, I'm not going to try to fake something I have felt or seen. I've never had an experience where I've screamed, uh, uncontrollably or run in any situation. But there's a lot of channels out there that do for likes and clicks. I'm not going to do that. I have had experiences, but never to the point where I felt uncomfortable. Well, okay, one place. But even then, I didn't yell like uncontrollably and run out of the building or run into another room or just be a maniac. It was this place, the haunted Shanley Hotel. Again, I don't have a lot of evidence from it. I only have experiences from it. I will say this, I will not go back there alone. I was with Ghost Hunts USA, but I was not with Pam. I was with her friend Kim, who had visited the place many times, so she knew the ins and outs of the place. And I don't have my um, footage or audio, unfortunately, from that because again, my laptop back then crapped the bed, and unfortunately, all that stuff was lost. But my experience there has made me think I want to go back so bad, but I want to go with a group or at least a few people because what I experienced there has been the only experience I've ever had that did scare me a little bit. It did. Uh, my first encounter, um, so I had gotten there and started talking to Kim, and then Pam had called Kim. So I was talking with Pam, and she was like, you're gonna have a good time, everything else. And I said, oh, good, I'm, excited. I left my Phasma box upstairs in my room, which is the gangster room, and I listened to the audio from that, and some of the stuff in there was so crazy. Um, there was no phones in the room, but I heard old uh, rotary phones going off. Uh, I also heard dogs barking. There was no dogs in the area or in the house. Um, the tour guide of the Shanley had said if you hear a cat, there is no cat in the building. And I actually did hear a cat. Kind of crazy, but there was no cat in the building. So we went up into the brothel area, and there was a woman named Anna that resided in one of the rooms. And uh, I went into her room, and I remembered hearing something on the bed, like the bed sheet kind of moved. I was the only one in that room, but my camera didn't capture, anything moving or anything. But I could hear it with my own ears. We had a um, music box in the room, and Kim was asking questions about, um, you know, is Anna in the room? This, that, and the other. It would go on. And then I started to leave the room to go into one of the other rooms, and it went off. And Kim asked, do you want George to stay in the room? And it went off again. So I stayed. We got a lot of EVPs where it sounded like angry men um, wanting to get at Anna. And I said, I will protect Anna. And at one point, I had felt uh, her standing behind me. And I kind of turned my head a little bit, and it felt like she was standing with her head right over my shoulder. And that was a bizarre feeling, because I'd never had one of those feelings before. But yeah, it was kind of crazy. And again, not captured on camera because my camera was facing forward. So, but that wasn't even half the experience I had. I remember calling my ex-wife. I was sitting on the bed, and I was getting ready to uh, do another part of the investigation when something behind me jumped into the bed. There was an imprint in the bed. And I was like, oh, I gotta go. I gotta capture something. Something just happened in my bedroom. So I hung up the phone. And I turned around, but the indent had disappeared. And I was like, God damn it, I couldn't capture it. But it was startling to me because the indent was right in the middle of the bed, like something jumped on the bed. It was so cool. So again, not scary. And I also didn't have to yell and run out and be like, oh my God, something just happened in here, or, be all crazy. The third floor was where a lot of people have the experiences. Now, the third floor is an attic area, but at the time, the hotel, it had plenty of rooms in it. But it was under construction upstairs. They were trying to restore the upstairs. So there were no beds or anything like that, but there was a lot of stories of what happened on the third floor to some of the people. So we entered a room where Joe, one of the Irish gangsters, stayed. There was a room off to uh, the side as a connecting. And the story went, it was a little boy that loved the hotel, uh, died at an early age. He was a next door neighbor. So that's the story. But the reality is, the kid that was living next door, who did like the hotel, got hit, but survived and was basically like a vegetable. So I don't know the lore of any more of it, or what could have been up there, but we had a flashlight on the chair and a music box in the room. So I walked into the room, and the light turned off, and the music box shut off. And for the first time, I noticed there was blinking lights on my camera. I never noticed it before. And that's when I happened to kind of look up, and a shadow figure was staring down at me right here. He was, or it was, at least probably 6'4", 6'5", and it was kind of looking down. Again, not captured on my camera. But I also had an experience that I can't explain. But picture a 90-degree room with no windows, and you become numb and cold from head to toe and you cannot move. So I don't know what was going on with me. And as soon as I could get feeling back in my foot, I took steps out. backwards out of the room. The light turned on, and the music box went back on. Phew, I'm okay. They asked what happened. I said, I don't know. I just had this weird cold feeling like I was frozen in time. I don't know if something was trying to enter me or I just froze because of what I saw, which was a giant shadow figure, which many people has documented and claimed to see the shadow figure roaming the halls of the third floor. So, did I see it with my own eyes? Yes. Did I capture it on camera? No. So, um, I, like an idiot, went back into the room. And the same thing happened again, except this time I did not see the shadow figure, but I did go head to toe numb. And I walked back out saying no, no, no. Somebody else walked into the room, nothing happened. So, we listened to the EVPs. I don't know, for some reason, didn't like me too much. I did walk back into the room, and as soon as the light went off, I walked right back out. I said, well, apparently something doesn't want me in there, I'm not going. I did walk out into the hallway, and I wish I had this evidence because I will never forget what happened. So I was standing in the middle of the hallway, and Kim was at the doorway in front of me, and there was a guy standing over here with dowsing rods facing the other hallway. So my back was to the hallway, and I literally heard something like this, like something ran at me. And as I got closer, I had turned toward it, and it stopped. But on the audio recording from my digital recorder, I heard it run by me and then smack into something and yell, fuck. So I replayed this over and over again because I wanted to know what I actually did capture. So I watched the footage that I had where I whipped around. The rest of the group was in the room. Kim was standing here, and the other guy was standing at the other hallway. So nobody was moving or nobody stepped into a wall. Or, and letting it play out, if somebody were to hit a wall, somebody would have said, hey, are you okay? That didn't happen. There was nothing there. There was silence. So hearing that and feeling like you're getting run up on, and then hearing, something smack into the wall and then yelling fuck is so crazy. And then we went into another room where there was a hanging, uh, and then there was a serial killer in another room, and somebody had saw the shadow figure standing in the hallway. I had put my camera into the doorway and turned it to where they could see the shadow figure, but it was not captured on it. So, again, a lot of times you can't capture this stuff on camera. But there's a lot of channels that will say that they captured it on camera. It doesn't happen that often. It really doesn't. I mean, I've caught a couple of orbs on camera that I can't explain, like at Murdoch Whitney. There was that whole thing. The other thing, the recreation of the first time going to Murdoch Whitney with Pam and I on the third floor was crazy. I'm in the second floor when I literally heard taunting from ghosts. It was Pam. Pam was in the kitchen where uh, the caretaker and a couple of his people were there, and they were talking. I had the Phasma box on and standing in front of the piano in the living room, and I had asked one of the ghosts to play a couple of keys so that I could see it move. And I heard taunting, like, "Hey, come here. You're not going to come upstairs. I'll let him come upstairs," so on. So I went upstairs. Nothing happened. I put my equipment away, but I left the Phasma box. So I had the Phasma box on, but I put my camera away. I went back up there, nothing happened. Pam comes up with me this time. She goes, "Let me see like if I can feel anything." Okay. So she's over on one side of the hallway, I'm on the other side. And I am facing the opposite wall. And she says to me, "George, turn 180 degrees, but very slowly. I need you to see what I'm seeing." Okay. So I did. Now I don't have a camera, so I'm only going visually. I saw a shadow figure about the size of a young boy, probably the little boy George who died of hematoma. And he was standing by the doorway. Now it was a solid black mass. And how do I know that? Is because I leaned on both sides. Now I remembered what the room he was standing in front of looked like. Well, I couldn't see beyond him on both sides. Or it. So then, as soon as I confirmed it, I had turned completely toward it, and it moved. And then I heard footsteps running away from me or running past me, so I had turned to see if I could see anything down the hallway, and that is when Pam started screaming, saying that something had just touched her boot. And I was like, "What?" And I spun around real quick, and I was like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm okay, but I want to head back downstairs." Before that, I had asked, "Hey, who was the funny person that touched Pam?" And I heard three distinctly different laughters. And I said to Pam, I said, "Well, not for nothing, but one of these three or three sounding um, laughters either knows who did it or one of them did it. So I'm sorry." And then I went downstairs, and before I went downstairs to end the night, I heard something to the effect of, uh, you know, you're weak or something like that. And I was like, "Okay, all right, see you all later." So again, I've had plenty of experiences, but never to the point where some of these investigations go. Which brings me to Matt Rife and his YouTube friend who bought the Conjuring the Warren Museum. I don't like the fact that they did buy the museum. I do not like the fact that um, that they're probably going to make a mockery of this because the group in question has been a little sketchy, and a comedian owning a piece of paranormal history is disturbing. What is also disturbing is the prices they are charging for visiting the house and the occult museum. So, for a night, you can stay at the Warren's house, the non haunted Warren's house, and investigate the museum or the shed for a very, very high price of, I believe it was like $2,000. But that ain't even the best part of this. So, not only do you get to stay in a non haunted house and get to see the museum in a very brief time, but if you do any recordings, you have to pay them to put it up on your YouTube channel. And oh, by the way, they get to control the content used. So, if, for example, you thought it was not very haunted and not quite what you had in mind, probably, that probably wouldn't make it into your YouTube channel video. So, what is to become of this? Well, with the group and Matt Rife, I believe that they pretty much priced any small group out. And the only groups that are going to go in there are the fake YouTube channels, the big channels that have way too many viewers who believe in these people. It's pretty sad because some of this stuff, I know I haven't watched a certain channel, but for them to have that many views and know that they literally are fake is ridiculous. And sad to say, it is what it is with the paranormal world right now. It really is. And so they've already put out a few videos, and it has been a nightmare. The debunkers have been all over them. Uh, we're already faking stuff to try to sell, time for people to come in there and investigate for themselves. But again, controlling content, not really what groups want to do. There are probably certain groups out there, like the fakers, that won't have an issue with that because they're going to go along with it to get their stuff out and then promote that business. I think it was a bad investment, but because somebody in the paranormal world who actually legitimately wants to preserve it, whether you believe that that stuff is haunted or not, is better off in the hands of those people than the crap that is out there right now. Which brings me to the Conjuring House, which is up for auction on Halloween. If I had the money or I could get a group of people together to buy it, I would certainly do it. And I would open it up to the public and charge very little money for groups to go in there and not fake stuff. Because when I was there, it was only after I had come back to start, reviewing some of the stuff when all the stuff happened at the Conjuring House. And I'm going to use them as an example, but Sam and Colby's first video with the Conjuring House, they were there a whole week with Cody and Satori. Satori is the daughter of Jason Haas. Cody is obviously her um, husband, and they did a whole video on communicating with spirit. I met Cody and Satori. They were very nice people. I actually had a conversation with them. Showed them the picture that Ashley and I took with Satori's father, Jason, at Paracon that year, and they never offered to do their talking spirit thing. Fine with me, because I was there to explore the house, not their thing. But Sam and Colby were there before me, and then a group that I really do like and got to meet at Paracon, Project Fear. And I know there's a lot of people out there that don't like Project Fear, but I do. Are they a little zany? Yes. They're young. And they, obviously, Dakota worked for Zach Bagans on Ghost Adventures, so he knew enough about the business enough to start his own group with his friends and his sister. And yeah, they're a little over the top and sometimes, you know, a little much, but I do find their content very entertaining. But they also had a segment with Cody and Satori, and then they did a follow up. And then this whole Jacqueline Nunez stuff happened, and it just got so crazy. It just got so crazy. And now the house is up for auction. And I'm hoping to God that somebody that actually loves the paranormal or a group that is non takers will buy the house and open it up to the public and charge less money to go there. It was an expensive trip for me and Ash, but we, we did it, and that stuff is going to come out later on. So, uh, because again, I didn't find the house to be that scary. There is another place that I would like to go back to, but I know I can't because I've had communications with the person that runs the place, the Lizzie Borden House. Um, they will not let small groups in there without one of their tour guides because they're an entertainment company. Sucks. So that's basically two places, or now three places in my area that I can't go to. Lizzie Borden House, Conjuring House, and the Warren Cult Museum. So, eventually I want to get back out on the road, and get to see some of these places and maybe collaborate with some groups. So if you are a group that's watching this right now and you would love to collaborate, if you've made it this far into the video, please contact me, and maybe next year I would go out and do that. I don't mind doing solos, um, because it's a completely different experience. If you watch the Wildwood Sanatorium one, I was there literally 15 hours, and not a lot happened to me there. Um, I've seen other footages from other groups that had some wild experiences. Also, Nick Roth was there with Katrina Weidman, and they had some experiences there, as I documented the mirror that broke um, in the little room off to the side door. Was kind of crazy. Got to see that person, but I didn't have the experience that I was intending to have because of all the stuff I had saw. It happens. It happens because again, the um, caretakers of the place had told me about the doll room and a couple of the dolls that were moving in the last few nights. And I was there, and they didn't move. I did ask. I know it's kind of creepy, but I was asking. But they did not move for me. Uh, but again, ghost hunting is, looked at as, glamorous. It's not that glamorous. Ghost Adventures has made it for years looking like it is glamour. And it's not. There's a lot of downtime. There's a lot of things that don't happen. Um, I've tried to do EVP sessions. Uh, don't seem to get any EVPs without my Phasma box. Just so happens. Now, spirit boxes um, are awful to hear playback, so I don't use them. Besides the fact that they sweep through radio stations, at least the Phasma box, you can turn the radio part off, and I've done that all the time because I don't want any interference. It doesn't mean that it is foolproof. Um, it also doesn't mean that everything I capture is audible, um, but I am pretty sure that the stuff that I've heard through listening to the Phasmabox audios, I do believe that there were things communicating, whether it was to me or themselves. Uh, there, you know, if you look at the Wildwood one, um, there seems to be, in the basement in that last section, um, a lot of interaction with the doctors down there or the patients as well. So again, you know was it the best evidence? No, it's mostly audio. There wasn't anything, you know, any shadow figures or any orbs that came through. Um, but that's unfortunately what paranormal investigations do. Like there's not all the glitzy. Oh, I saw that shadow figure. I saw movement. I saw this. I see that. And, oh, I heard that. Yeah, I've heard things too. Um, but again, with the running in the hallway, it sounded so real. The also Wilson's Castle. I was doing my walkthrough after uh, the owner of the place had left, and I was completely alone on the second floor. And in the attic, I heard footsteps above me, and I noted it, and I'm trying to weed it out, but hopefully I can, so that you guys can hear it when it drops. So again, the paranormal world itself is just a circus. A lot of it is a lot of clicks and likes. There are too many paranormal channels that are literally faking content for you to watch. Their thumbnails alone are just clickbait. And if you go through paranormal uh, thumbnails, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. Especially one of the groups that I had already mentioned in this. There are so many others. And then there are so many other people that are fake mediums or saying that they're mediums. They're not. They're YouTube creators, they're TikTok creators, and so on. Again, I'm not going to bring up names. I'm not going to mention any because I don't really care to mention them at all because I don't watch any of your stuff. I let the debunkers take care of that. So, and then I watch their debunking videos and I get sick to my stomach because there are a lot of people who do follow me on Instagram and do follow me on my YouTube channel because I started it for my paranormal stuff. And I want to thank them for being real. And there are too many to acknowledge, so um, I'll acknowledge them on an Instagram post. Maybe they can watch this content. Maybe they can help me out. Maybe even collaborate. I did collaborate with Sean from Scary Cat Paranormal. His stuff is linked. His channel is linked in my channel's page, so you can go and check his stuff out. Um, he's a really cool guy, and his friend Mark and Ari and I did Letchworth together. Um, that was a 3 or 4 hour investigation. It was kind of cool. It was wide open. Um, we couldn't go through there in the dark. So, um, but we did capture a couple of things on there, and can't wait for you guys to see this. Um, so, thank you all for listening. I know this is long-winded and so on, but all right, that is it. Thank you all for watching, and look for my stuff, and also look for the podcasts. So, goodbye.